All right, everyone. So I just got done reading this book. It is called The Invention of Prehistory. Let me just make sure you guys can see it here. It's a little bit mirrored, but it's called The Invention of Prehistory by Stefanos Gerolanos. And he's a Greek guy, and he wrote a book. Very fascinating read, very informative. I will say the book is about really the history of Darwinism, but more than that, it's on the history of the West's obsession with how did we evolve from lower hominid creatures, and what is the origin of mankind, and really, to be more specific, it's about the obsession of the evolutionists on how we evolved from some hominid creatures, how we evolved from the Neanderthals and all this stuff. And really how that obsession, how that ideology led to massive crimes of genocide, because the evolutionists taught that the black man was merely a living fossil. Now, what did they mean by a living fossil? Well, they believed that we evolved from some sort of humanoid creatures tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of years ago. And so these humanoid creatures, well, they weren't fully evolved. They were less evolved than Homo sapiens. And in that transition point, between a lower humanoid between a lower humanoid and a Homo sapien, somewhere in the middle of all that, there was the African, the black man. And so the black man was a living fossil, time locked within that period in which humanity had not yet fully evolved. And so the black man was closer to the pre-human humanoid creatures. The black man was this earlier version of human, so a less evolved human. And that way of thinking led to genocide. That way of thinking led to this belief that said that the white man was the most evolved human, that the white man was the most human. And so you had people who believed that they had the right to exterminate other people, to exterminate blacks, to genocide people because in their heads they were inferior. And you had this sort of thinking that was adopted by the Ottoman Empire when they genocided the Armenians. So evolutionism led to this idea that that genocide was scientifically justified. Because according to Darwinism, genocide is simply a part of nature. And because genocide is a part of nature, there's nothing really wrong with genocide. It's simply a part of the human condition. And not only this, but genocide and war actually helps the human species, according to Darwinism, because in war and in genocide, the unfit are purged out, and thus their inferior genetics are purged out of the gene pool. And the gene pool is cleansed of inferior genes, thus bettering the human species. And so it was with this mentality that genocides were done. And it was with this mentality that genocides were given a scientific pretext or a scientific justification. The whole damn thing is utterly satanic. It's completely and utterly satanic. That's what evolutionism is. It's a satanic ideology that glorifies death. And this book more or less does a good job in explaining this ideology and explaining the history of this ideology. Now, the author of the book, Mr. Getolanos, he is a liberal. I'll just say this right off the bat, or however you say that terminology, right off the bat, right from the get-go. I will say that this author, Mr. Getolanos, he is a liberal, and so we don't agree, obviously, with everything. But for the most part, I do agree with this book. When it comes to the history of Darwinism, when it comes to the destructiveness of Darwinism, when it comes to the rotten fruits of Darwinism, this book gets into the nitty-gritty details of that dark reality, the dark reality of Darwinism. And it just makes you wonder, why in the hell is the Vatican accepting evolutionism? The Vatican started to accept evolutionism back when Pope John Paul II was the head of the papacy, and he said that evolutionism was true. And so it makes you wonder, why in the hell is the Catholic Church accepting an ideology that promotes destruction and genocide? It makes you wonder how pro-life the Vatican really is. And the whole Vatican really is just, it's a big joke. It really is. I was watching Catholic television today, and I couldn't believe it. Oh my God, Catholic media, guys, is trying to be so, it's trying so hard to be hip and cool and relevant, and they're trying so hard to adapt to the modern day media fashion, which is the podcast, right? The podcast is the most up-to-date form of self-expression in media. The podcast. You know, everyone wants to do the most popular, the most common setup for a podcast. Everyone wants to get those fancy, expensive, Shure microphones, and they want to get the Sony cameras and all that. I saw this Catholic show today, and they're doing it's a Catholic podcast, and it's so damn cringe. It is. I was watching it today. I just couldn't stop laughing. Oh my gosh. They have these three guys there, and they all have their fancy microphones, and they're sitting around this table, and they're just jabbering. And the way they're talking with this, I want to say almost with this vocal fry. And they're like, well, you know, Holy Father, the Holy Father, well, you know what the Pope said, the Holy Father, blah, 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 well, you know, His Holiness said, I'm like, what in the hell are these guys talking about? What are they saying? It's not even audible. It's inaudible. I can't understand what these people are saying. And as they're just jabbering, going off about whatever, the Holy Father this and the Holy Father that, I couldn't believe it. I had to squint my eyes because I don't have the best vision without my glasses. And I was squinting my eyes, and I thought, is that what I think it is? And I squinted my eyes even harder, and I said, oh my gosh, yes, it is. It's exactly what I'm seeing. They had Funko Pops. Guys, they had Funko Pops on the table where all their microphones were at. Freaking Funko Pops on the table. Oh my God, guys. They had, I kid you not, they had a Jesus Funko Pop on the table. I am not joking. I'm not making this up. And I'm pretty certain this was on EWTN. Jesus Funko Pop on the table. As soon as I saw it, I was reminded of Jay Dyer making fun of people who have Funko Pops. And for this until now, I thought that Jay Dyer's mockery of people who own Funko Pops was just a big joke. right? He has a song about people who own Funko Pops. You know, I'm married. I'm married to a Funko Pop. Whoa. And I'm thinking, okay, it's a big joke, right? No, it's not a joke. It's real. Catholics, you have Catholics running a Catholic podcast, and they have a Jesus Funko Pop on the table. And as soon as I saw it, I was like, squinting my eyes, and I see the Jesus Funko Pop on the table. And all of a sudden, I hear this song in my head. I'm married. I'm married to a Funko Pop. Whoa. I have a Jesus Funko Pop on the table. It's just shocking, right? But it's just the whole Catholic Church is just a big joke. It really is. But going back to this book on evolutionism, I mean, really, the whole thing is just so ridiculous. It's just, there's so much ridiculousness in the world of evolutionism. Some anthropologist finds something, I don't know, he finds a skull in some swamp in Africa somewhere, in some cave in Africa somewhere, and then he says, oh, look, I found this the remnant of a humanoid creature, one of our evolutionary ancestors, one of the transitional fossils that proves that we evolved from apes. And then you look at it, you're like, I'm thinking it's a skull. But look, it's abnormal in size. Okay, maybe the guy had a deformity. What can you prove by looking at it? All that you can prove is that somebody died and you found his skull. But it proves that we evolved from humanoid creatures hundreds of thousands of years ago. It's evidence. It's like you found a skull in a cave in South Africa somewhere. I mean, really, calm down. And from just a skull, all of a sudden they're making an entire history up. And I'm thinking, we're still debating about what happened in World War I. We're still debating about World War II. We're still debating about 9/11. But you guys know for a fact that we evolved from some hominid creatures 100,000, 75,000, 500,000 years ago. And you find a skull somewhere and you're like, oh, look, it's Timbuktu Man. We found him. He's one of our ancestors. And then you find out later that the whole thing's just a fraud. You know, there was this thing that evolutionists made up, and the book talks about this. It was called, called Piltdown Man or something like that. I don't remember it, but it was just a total, it was just a total fraud. Was this a hoax? Piltdown Man. Yeah, Piltdown Man. Oh, yeah, I was correct. Yeah, Piltdown Man. Yeah, and the book talks about how these evolutionists like Charles Dawson and all that, and these other people like him, Charles Dawson and his ilk, they just came up with this hoax. I mean, they made it up. They just they took a skull and they put the tooth of a dog in the skull so that it looked like this skull had canine teeth. Canine teeth. Yeah, so they try to use this skull to prove that original man or some hominid creature that we evolved from had canine teeth. And so therefore, human beings at one point in time had canine teeth. We were like rabid, wild, savage animals. And yes, human beings, we had canine teeth. And then we evolved from that. And then we started getting smaller, more flat teeth. And you see, evolution, it's proof. And then it turns out that they just made up the whole damn thing. It's bullshit. It's bullshit. Now, why did they have to make it up? Ask yourself that. Why did they have to make this thing up? And then it wasn't until, I want to say decades later, that they found out that the whole thing was bullshit. It's bullshit. It's bullcrap. Why? Because the whole thing was a fraud. And these people were desperate. These evolutionists, they were desperate, just like they're desperate right now, to prove that there was no God and that God didn't create us and that we are merely the product of some random evolutionary process that entails wild hominid creatures butchering each other until they evolved into Homo sapiens. And then Homo sapiens were killing each other, and they're still killing each other. And through this process of killing and death, unfit genes are purged out, and we are continuing on this path to more evolution. And that's all they want to prove. They love evolutionism because it gives them power. Evolutionism is an ideology of the elite. That's what it is. It's a way for elites to say, we are above you, you Christian people, because we believe in science. And not only that, we are above you because we believe in this theory of evolution, and it makes us look more intelligent than you. And not only that, we have this theory that justifies scientifically, with scientific terminology, that some people are superior to others, and we're superior to you. And that's why they were so obsessed. Remember years ago, they were so obsessed with finding a gene that made people religious. Do you guys remember that? I remember that. I remember seeing this, I want to say when I was in high school. These evolutionists were talking about how there could be a gene that makes people religious. And why do you think they were so obsessed with that? Why do you think they would be so obsessed with finding a religion gene? So that they could look at religious people. This was the whole motivation. I don't even have to prove it. It's just obvious to me, because ever since the beginning, ever since the inception of evolutionism, evolutionists were trying to use this theory of evolution to prove that certain people were inferior. And so they were obsessed with finding the religion gene. Why? So that they could look at religious people, point to religious people and say, these religious people are stupid because they believe in religion, and they have the genetics that make them religious. Therefore, they are genetically stupid, and therefore, they are genetically inferior to us, because we, as atheists, we don't have that religion gene. Therefore, we don't believe in superstition. And we evolved. Our ancestors, the ancestors of atheists, they evolved out of religion. They purged that gene out of themselves somehow. Maybe all the religious people in their ancient family got killed off, or a lot of them got killed off, or something like that. And then that genetic predisposition towards religion just sort of disappeared somehow. It faded away somehow. But these religious people, they have the religion gene, and that proves that they are genetically stupid. And then if they could prove a religion gene, they could then say, "Oh, look, let's if we're going to make the world smarter, we have to get rid of religious people. But if we're going to get rid of religious people, we have to get rid of the religion gene." So that would mean, well, I don't know, forcing religious people to have abortions, or forcing religious people to go through embryo selection so that we could only allow embryos that don't have the religion gene to be born. I mean, you could just imagine the sick aspirations these people have behind this obsession with finding the religion gene. I can totally see it. But yes, evolutionism is it's an evil, destructive ideology. And there's a line in this book, or maybe a couple of lines, that I want to read to you guys. And it's just look at this. So the book quotes a modern day Darwinist by the name of Yuval Harari. Yuval Harari is a homosexual Israeli. Yuval Harari is a homosexual Israeli transhumanist, which means that he's a eugenist. He believes that we can accelerate the process of human evolution by merging man with AI. So it's just another way of doing eugenics. And Yuval Harari wrote, "Just 6 million years ago, a single female ape had 2 daughters. One became the ancestor of all chimpanzees. The other is our own grandmother." Now, according to Yuval Harari, all religion is garbage, and the book of Genesis is a myth, and it's all fake, and the Bible is fake. And by the way, Yuval Harari mocks God all the time. This guy mocks God all the time. He said that because he's Israeli. So he said, well, back in the Old Testament days, if you didn't do what God wanted, God would curse the people of Israel with a drought. He says, but we, the Israelites of today, we have such an advanced water system here in Israel that not even God himself could give us a drought. This is what Yuval Hariri said. I'm thinking, Yuval, be very, very careful. But according to Yuval Hariri, the book of Genesis is all nonsense. But also, according to Yuval Hariri, just 6 million years ago, a single female ape had 2 daughters. One became the ancestor of all chimpanzees. The other is our own grandmother. How in the hell do you know that, Mr. Hariri? So in other words, believing in Adam and Eve, oh, that's religious nonsense. But Yuval Hariri is saying, well, there was this one female chimp who lived a million gazillion years ago, and that's our original grandmother. So the book of Genesis, oh, that's a bunch of nonsense. But Yuval Hariri saying that bullshit? Oh, genius. We have to believe in Yuval Hariri. So the Bible is a myth, but the bullshit that this Israeli guy is spouting, we need to accept that as science because, he's the transhumanist genius. It's all just a bunch of bullshit, guys. Evolutionism is bullshit. It is. It's bullshit. And if you read the history of this ideology and how it developed and all the people who were behind it, there's a lot of funny business. There's a lot of finagling around. Oh, let's make up this thing. Piltdown Man. Oh, yes, we found it, guys. The missing link. The fossil that proves that we transitioned from some lower hominid creature into Homo sapien. Right here, guys, right here. And it was bullshit. They had to make up a forgery because it's bullshit. And then they find a skull somewhere in Africa somewhere. Look, guys, look, one of our evolutionary ancestors, one of the hominid creatures that we evolved from. This could be our great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather to the millionth degree. Oh my gosh. And we're supposed to believe it. And that's the reason why these evolutionists love evolutionism. Because they made evolutionism the dominating theory when it comes to human origins, so that if you believe in Christianity, they can call you an idiot. And if you don't believe in evolutionism, they can say that you're a moron and that you're inferior or that you're backwards and that you're just a country bumpkin or whatever. And they can look intelligent. And so in that condition, in such an environment, they can make up whatever bullshit they want. And you have to believe it, because if you don't believe it, then, well, you're an idiot. You're not scientific. You're not up to date to the scientific discoveries. And what did this cult of science lead to? And this is the main theme, the main subject that this book focuses on. What it led to is the genocide of other human beings. The genocide and the enslavement of other human beings. That's what it led to. The Ottoman Empire absorbed evolutionism in the beginning of the 20th century. And what did that lead to? It led to these atheist Ottomans, known as the Young Turks, saying, in the theory of evolution, in the law of evolutionism, there is this struggle for survival, and in this struggle for survival, there is something called the survival of the fittest. Only the fit survive. And the Armenians, well, they're just not fit. We are the powerful empire. We are superior to the Armenians in our military might. And therefore, in the law of survival, in this ruthless struggle for survival, we can exterminate the Armenians, and we're okay because we are doing the natural law of survival of the fittest. And the Germans did a genocide of the Herero and the Nama people in Namibia, and then eventually the Germans genocided the Jews. And according to all of these orchestrators of genocide, be it the Ottomans, be it the Nazis, be it whoever, whichever one of these genociders, they all had one thing in common, and that was, we are simply observing the law of might makes right. And according to science, the fit are the ones who are going to survive. And by surviving, that means exterminating the unfit. And so you have these atheists who'll sit there and say, well, religion just led us into barbarism. What the hell is the Holocaust? What the hell is the Armenian genocide? What's all these genocides that were orchestrated by people who believed in evolution? And then they will talk about the Enlightenment. Oh, well, the Enlightenment of the 18th century, it was amazing. And then you read about the French Revolution. Literally millions of people butchered by the French revolutionaries. Millions. Around 3 million people were butchered by French revolutionaries. And then the French Revolution led to the Napoleonic Wars, and that led to millions more dying and being killed. And this was the rotten fruit of the Enlightenment. So they'll sit there and say, oh, we have to believe in scientists to the point where we have to believe in their theory of evolutionism. And if we don't, well, we're just idiots. But then they'll say that religion leads to barbarism, but then you read about the genocides of the 20th century and you see evolutionism being used as a scientific justification for mass murder. Then they'll sit there and say, well, we know, and the book talks about this as well, we know for a fact that humankind evolved out of being these hominid creatures at around 100,000 years ago. They knew this. They were so certain. Or at one point they said that the moment when humans evolved out of being lower hominid creatures was around 500,000 years ago. So 500,000 years ago, human beings became Homo sapiens, right? They left the condition of being hominids and they became Homo sapiens. And people were so certain that that happened 500,000 years ago. Then they changed their minds. Well, oh, no, actually, no, it was 70,000 to 100,000 years ago. And then not too long after that, then people started believing in the same bullshit they were believing in before. That, well, actually, no, it was 300,000 or maybe 500,000 years ago. And they don't even know. But when they talked in this way, they were so certain, right? They were so confident that they were correct. Piltdown Man. They were so confident that Piltdown Man was real, but it was a forgery. It was bullshit. We can't even agree 100% on what caused World War I. There's debates about what triggered World War I. There are debates about World War II. There are debates about 9/11. There are debates about the Iraq War. And yet we are believing a bunch of people when they talk about what happened 500,000 years ago. And we're so confident that these people are correct. It just doesn't make any sense. I mean, and the book has this really interesting line in the end. It talks about how evolutionists want us to throw away written history. And I thought that was interesting. I had to underline that line. They want us to throw away and they want us to ignore written history. When you look at written history, you're reading, right, documents from a particular time period. And those documents give you details about the time periods in which they were written. So you want to know about World War I, you read the letters and the diaries of soldiers who fought in World War I. You're getting actual knowledge of those events. Or if you want to understand things about ancient Egypt, you read documents, you read inscriptions from ancient Egypt. And the same thing can be said about any other ancient civilization. But when you talk about evolutionism and how, and this idea that we evolved from lower hominids, and when you hear this sort of thing, the people who are saying these things, they speak with so much confidence, and yet there are no written records of evolutionism. There's no written records of mankind 500,000 years ago, 100,000 years ago, 50,000 years ago. It doesn't exist. But yet the people who are pushing evolutionism speak with so much blind confidence as if they're religious. Anyway, it's a good book. You don't have to agree with everything in the book, but for the most part, I agree with what this book says. And the book is very educational because it teaches you about the history of Darwinism. So that's always great. Anyway, You guys just heard some theology. God bless.